I first want to say aloha and welcome to Hawaii. It's so awesome to have the entire commission here in our homeland. And typically when we open an important meeting or any family party or event, we do our normal protocol. So today it is my honor to really introduce and welcome Kumuhina Le Moana Kalu, but we call her Kumuhina. She has been an amazing champion for our LGBTQ community here in Hawaii, talking about the historical context of dual identities in our Native Hawaiian community and how we lost that through colonization. She's also been a preserver of our language and our culture, and while I am her elder, she has been a mentor to me in many ways to ground me in our language and our culture, and so it was really an honor to invite her to be in our space. And what she's going to do this morning is welcome you all here to Hawaii. She is going to do an oli that calls on the peaks of the highest mountaintops from each of our islands, because the significance of this meeting and welcoming you all here, the work that we will do here today will stretch across our pai'aina. And so her oli talks about the depth and the magnitude, and she's calling all of that to bring us good vibe into this space and to set us off on a good course. And so without further ado, Kumuhina.
Ano ai te alohe a katoa pauloa e nā halakai, e nā elele, e nā leo, e kipa mai nei e nā hoa makamaka a kākou, e launa nei maloko te ilumi no te katoa halawai ana i te katiaka, o te aloha nui o te aina i a katoa pau. Mahalo anui o te ihui ana. Mahalo anui a oto no te oto mauhana mai tai. Mahalo anui no te hoʻokupa a ana. Mahalo, mahalo, mahalo. Ke olu olu e launa punoho i kātou. Na ka leo, he ana, ka mana o ke atua, he ana i ka mana o te aina. O ka ola e ke akua e nana mai ka o mau pula pula e ola ka niko o a umaka i ole a palala uhala a ka ui ka pu ane ane a laila lave a ku oe a ui de alo wa ke ae o ka uola e ke akua e nana mai ka o mau pula pula e ola ka niko o a umaka i o le a palala uhala a ka ui ka bu ane ane a laila lave a ku oe a u i ke alo wa ke ae o ka uola e ke akua e nana mai ka o mau pula pula e ola ka niko o aha umaka i ole a palala uhala A ka ui ka pu ane ane A laila lawe aku oe au I te alo wa ke ai Modu da baba ka veno ke ao hea ula nei e lei malama lama lei kua lon lei kua hivi o hau mei kalai Mai ka hikina mai hae hae mai kumukahi I lono nui a kea Mai kalai la ka mai a ka noe ula kala I ke alo o mauna lo hae No mauna ke no walalai No ko halai ke ehu kakahi a ka no lai E o kama ehu kupuna haa ka nā loa No loko lilo o ka moana lipo lipo Ho o ipo ka hahano o ke kukuna la I hale aka la kahi o ke kauloho kapua o hina E o e makua hine hina o ka makou E o e kaulahe o lana I hale E o e moa ula nui la o moa ula iki Hea kuana laina kukulu o ga hiki Hiki na ea kulei ka ihi kapu aino ahu nui alua Ku hano hano mai o mauna ka ala A ala ka laua A ala ka moki hana A ala ka maile kaluhea o ka mawai lua lani Nani lua ole ka heleni ka lalau A yala ka wai mapunolo wai ale ale No na naluna ale kai hoi E hea hea nei e hoi ka waa Hoi aku I ka malu ihi o pani au He lauele he ka mana o upua ke aloha Ka hali ali ai ka moe na pawehe o ka ua No ka helelani e ia ka hulilani E o mai a kalani o ke aua malama lama O malama O pulama Ho ahia kalama kukui he maa no a ka mai E ia ka mahalo ka haina no ia lei Ka puana o ke aloha He aloha la He aloha 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 Aloha, aloha, aloha. Mahalo.
Aloha and welcome everyone. My name is Vivian Chow and I'm the lead designated federal officer for the President's Advisory Commission on Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders, which I will refer to as the Commission. It is my great pleasure to welcome you to the 6th public meeting of the Commission, which was authorized through President Biden's signing of Executive Order 14031 to advance equity, justice, and opportunity for Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander communities. Since our last meeting in March this year, the Commission's 6 subcommittees have been engaging intensively with subject matter experts, deliberating and preparing recommendations that will be shared in detail, both with the full Commission and the public over the course of today's meeting. This is a federal advisory committee, and it operates under the regulations of the Federal Advisory Committee Act. The advisory committee process ensures independent review in an open and public manner with opportunities for public participation. To ensure that all voices are heard, we need your cooperation in organizing communications with the Commission. For our community members and partners who are watching the live stream of this meeting, the broadcast includes an American Sign Language interpreter and closed captioning services for those who are hard of hearing. We will not be having oral comments at today's meeting. However, you may submit written comments at any time to aanhpicommission@hhs.gov. That is aanhpicommission@hhs.gov. Your messages will be shared with the Commission for their consideration, and we look forward to hearing from you. Tomorrow, the Commissioners will host an in-person listening session to hear from individuals who responded to the Commission's request for public comment posted in the Federal Register earlier this year. To the Commission, if any members of the Commission are contacted by special interest groups, please refer the contact to your designated federal officer. We will arrange to share the information with the full Commission in accordance with FACA regulations. I also invite members of the public who are tuning in to visit our website at hhs.gov/about/WHI-AA-NHPI for updates on the White House Initiative and the Commission to learn more about our activities. There you can find information about the Commission, including their charter, Commissioner biographies, and past meeting materials. We will also announce upcoming Commission meeting dates and locations on this site, as well as through the Federal Register. I'm very pleased now to introduce Ms. Crystal Ka'ai, who serves as the Executive Director of the White House Initiative and the Commission. She is the first Native Hawaiian to be appointed to this role, where she is responsible for advising the Biden-Harris administration on the coordination and implementation of federal programs, policies, and initiatives to advance equity, justice, and opportunity for Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander communities. It is a great honor and privilege to introduce Ms. Crystal Ka'ai.
Thank you, Vivian. Aloha, everyone. Good morning to our commissioners who are here in Hawaii with us, and then also to those tuning in from across the country virtually. Good afternoon to many of you. I want to thank, first of all, Michelle Ka'uhane, one of our commissioners, and Kumuhina, who did that opening Hawaiian protocol for us this morning, to really set positive intentions for the day ahead and to honor our Native Hawaiian culture here in Hawaii. This is the Commission's first meeting outside of Washington, D.C. They have been meeting regularly on a quarterly basis since they were appointed by the President and sworn in by the Vice President in February of last year. This is the 6th full Commission meeting, and the first, as I mentioned, outside of Washington, D.C. Most of the Commission's meetings have been at the White House, but the Commission made very clear that as part of the work they do, they wanted to ensure that they were able to go directly into communities. And here in the state of Hawaii, where over 2/3 of the state's population are Asian American, Native Hawaiian, or Pacific Islander, the Commission made it, again, such a clear intention to ensure that they could go directly to the communities to be able to hear directly from so many Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islanders about the unique needs and challenges that they face. And that's exactly what the Commission will be doing tomorrow as part of a listening session they are holding. I want to just say how active this Commission has been, and I'm a little biased, but I think this is actually the most active President's Advisory Commission for the Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander community that we've ever had in the over 2 decades history of this Commission. And so I really want to applaud the Commissioners for your tireless work and all that you have accomplished in less than a year and a half since you were first sworn in. I now have the distinct honor and pleasure to introduce one of our Commission's co-chairs, who is U.S. Trade Representative Ambassador Tai. She serves as one of the members of the President's Cabinet, actually one of 3 Asian American women serving in the President's Cabinet. And unfortunately, she was unable to join us in person today, but she did submit a video. I do also want to acknowledge 2 of her staff members, Jamila Thompson and Roberto from her team, who are here with us in person on her behalf. And so without further ado, we will turn it over to the Ambassador's video.
Hello everyone and aloha. Thank you to the entire WIONP team for making this meeting possible. I'm really sorry I can't join you in person, but I wanted to take a moment to speak with you. We're already in July, but in some ways, it still feels like May. That's because we had such a terrific month celebrating our heritage. The WIONP Forum at George Washington University was a huge success. We had nearly 1,000 elected officials, community leaders, and business leaders from all across the country. We discussed different topics impacting our communities nationally, and of course, the event was capped off with our fabulous Vice President Kamala Harris. Some of my additional AA and NHPI Heritage Month activities included a trip to Phoenix and Los Angeles, where I met with community organizers and small businesses owners to hear their concerns and priorities. I also joined Congresswoman Chu for a moving and emotional meeting with the Monterey Park community to pay my respects to the victims of the tragedy in February. There were many other events and celebrations throughout the month, but I think the takeaway is that our communities are stronger when we team up to be visible together. No, we are not monolithic. We are a community of communities. But whether we work in a steel mill on the East Coast or make natural wine on the West Coast, we all want to be seen, heard, and treated with dignity and respect. We all strive to provide a better tomorrow for our families, loved ones, and our neighbors, and do so in a way that celebrates our rich heritage. This is what binds us together, and our solidarity is more critical now as some seek to sow division and turn back the clock of progress. Education is key for workers, families, and communities to thrive, and many in our communities know this from firsthand experience. That is why our administration is taking steps to keep the doors of opportunity open to every American. Communities of color are going through some very challenging times. Throughout history, we have faced questions about belonging in a country that often sees us as other. But rather than accepting that as our destiny, I believe we can and must chart a different path. And I remain hopeful that we can and will succeed when we come together. The Commission's leadership and dedication plays such a crucial role in this moment. You continue to pave the way in your tireless commitment, dedication, and hard work. While this is already the Commission's 6th public meeting, you are constantly working at the subcommittee level to develop and advance recommendations on discrimination, data disaggregation, language access, immigration, and economic equity. The administration appreciates your commitment and is trying to keep up with your realizing of your recommendations. Speaking of which, I am thrilled for the WIONP Economic Summit in Honolulu this Friday. When I attended the inaugural summit in Philadelphia, it was clear that these meetings have a concrete and real impact on people's lives. They align with President Biden's vision to build our economy from the bottom up and the middle out, and embody bringing opportunities, investments, lower costs, and services to our workers, communities, and small businesses. It has been a pleasure to serve as co-chair of this commission alongside Secretary Becerra. As I have traveled throughout the country, I have been fortunate to see the many ways that your service is changing people's lives. I know that not every meeting will feel like we are moving mountains, but our collective resolve will sow the seeds of hope and justice that will bloom for years to come. I'm grateful to have you all as teammates and colleagues. Let's continue to build on our progress. Thank you very much.
Thank you to Ambassador Tai for those really just warm greeting messages for our commissioners and for our audience. Next, I have the honor of introducing someone who is no stranger to this community, a good friend and colleague, Erica Moritsugu, who serves as Deputy Assistant to the President and Senior Liaison to the Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander community. Erica, the floor is yours.
Aloha. Aloha. Mahalo, Crystal, for the wonderful introduction. On behalf of the White House, it is my honor to share this space with you, especially here in my home state of Hawaii. I'd like to start by giving thanks, a very humble and heartfelt mahalo to Commissioner Michelle Kauhane and Kumahina, who opened this commission meeting with her sacred oli. And I must thank the following teams for their generous partnership and leadership. The President's Commissioners, of course, the White House Initiative team, the Hawaii Congressional Delegation, the state of Hawaii and its cities and counties, every member of our federal family, and our partners at National ACE. I greatly appreciate all of the intentionality and effort you've invested to organize this commission meeting, tomorrow's economic summit, and the site visits during our time in the Aloha State. This is the embodiment of the way we approach our work on behalf of the Biden-Harris administration to advance justice, equity, and opportunity for Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders. Since his first day in office, the president made it clear that it's a priority of his administration to advance equity for underserved communities. And over the past 2.5 years, the Biden-Harris administration has been working tirelessly to deliver on this promise. From the regional economic summits to the release of the first ever national strategy for AA and NHPI communities, we're building on the president's whole of government equity agenda with over 30 federal agencies to tackle some of the most cross-cutting areas of concern and importance to AA and They understand our diverse communities and sincerely care about us. This is their kuleana and ours. Crystal and I were honored to work for the beloved late Senator Daniel Keakaka, who taught us how to lead with aloha. And we carry those values with us in our work for President Biden and Vice President Harris. By bringing together community and business leaders in our keiki and our kupuna, this week's convenings will help to ensure that we are well informed directly by the impact of communities here in Hawaii to advance common goals for the betterment of our AA and NHPI communities as a whole. That's why Crystal and I and our colleagues have traveled thousands of miles all across the country, visiting dozens of diverse communities in celebration and sometimes in trauma. These communities are diverse on a racial, ethnic, religious, geographic, generational, and intersectional basis. And we listen and learn from local leaders and integrate those learnings back into our policies. Please know that you have a partner in this administration in our collective efforts to advance equity, justice, and opportunity for AA and NHPI communities. And thanks to President Biden, we've become more visible together than ever before. But we don't, and we can't, and we shouldn't do this work alone. From the White House, I work very closely with the initiative and the Commission and the White House Office of Public Engagement, and across all of the White House components in the interagency and intergovernmental spaces. But our successes are also dependent on your mana'o, your insights and wisdom. We need strong partners like the leaders in this room and those of you who are participating in this meeting remotely from across different time zones. You play an essential role in advocating for the AA and NHPI communities and strengthening our lahui. Now, speaking of mana'o, I do want to reaffirm and add my voice to my gratitude and reverence for the work of this commission. These are excellent local leaders from across the country, across sectors, providing recommendations to the administration, and for the first time on a rolling basis, the Economic Equity Summits, one of which will be tomorrow here on Oahu, and the Mental Health Summit, am I supposed to have said that yet? Later this month, are a direct result, are the product of the recommendations of this body. They have dozens more recommendations that are underway, and we'll be hearing more about the deliberations today, during today's session. Speaking of strong partners and leading with aloha, it is now my distinct honor to introduce our next speaker. My friend, a great leader and an inspiration to so many, our Chief Commissioner to the President's Advisory Commission on AA and NHPIs, Ms. Sonal Shah. Madam Chief Commissioner, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Erica. Thank you for your leadership and to Crystal's leadership with the White House Commission and the White House office. It's an amazing amount of work that you all have put in. I want to start with first thanking Michelle. Thank you for such the warm welcome in bringing us here to Hawaii, but also when we walked in the room and your warm welcome here, it is very much an aloha. So thank you, and to Kumalina for coming here and for blessing us this morning. Such important blessings that we have. Let me start with, on behalf of the Commission, I want to extend my sincere gratitude to the state of Hawaii for hosting us here at the state capitol. We are honored to gather in the building that represents the diverse communities that live in this great state and the vibrant cultural heritage of the people of Hawaii. I also want to acknowledge the Native Hawaiian community, whose rich culture and language continue to inform how we can live deeper relationship between the land, the seas, and the people. The Commission recognizes and is grateful for the contribution of the Native Hawaiian community. Before I get started, I wanted to start with a few things. A reminder of our role on the Commission, which is actually important for us just to remember. Now that we're almost a year and a half in, I think it's good for us to just step back for a second. The Executive Order 14031 authorized the creation of the President's Advisory Commission, charges this commission with advising the President on ways to advance equity, justice, and opportunity for the AA and NHPI communities. More specifically, the EO outlines 7 key priority areas for the Commission that range from advancing inclusion, belonging, and public awareness of the diversity and accomplishments of AA and NHPI people, cultures, and histories, to improving research and equitable data disaggregation, to identifying strategies to increase public and private sector collaboration, and more. As we continue to think about our impact and legacy as a commission, it is imperative that we keep these 7 priority areas in mind as we submit our recommendations to the President. Second, the role of the commission and each of the subcommittees is to do the research on recommendations that we might be pursuing. This includes speaking to experts in government, academia, think tanks, and nonprofit leaders. It requires knowing the data, making sure it is verifiable, and the recommendation is accurate to be presented to the President. Third, the Commission only makes policy recommendations to the President. We do not make policy. And I just want everybody to understand, not just in this commission, but those that are watching, we do not make policy, we make recommendations to the President. We are proud that many of our commission's recommendations have been acted upon by the President, but want to be clear about our role. We are not employed by the federal government, nor do we make decisions on behalf of the President or the administration. We are an independent federal advisory committee and want to ensure that the public is also aware of this important distinction. Finally, when subcommittee recommendations are asked to be held or tabled during a full commission meetings, they are largely because we do not have the accurate data and citations, the appropriate input, or are not quite ready to present to the President. Please give grace to the commissioners as each subcommittee works tirelessly to deliberate on topics, draft recommendations, and get these recommendations finalized and voted out of our committees to present to the full commission. We want these recommendations to be taken seriously and hence work very hard to get the details that we need and ensure that we have the facts and the data that the federal agencies will need to make decisions. We are all working as hard and as fast as we can, but no decisions are made lightly in this room. So just a recap of what's been happening since this past commission meeting. As Chief Commissioner, I'd like to take the time to recognize the extraordinary dedication of the 6 subcommittees, all of whom prioritized issues, gathered information, consulted subject matter experts, deliberated, developed draft recommendations collaboratively over the last 3 months. This has been no easy task. I've been on just enough of the meetings to know that how much work goes into each of these meetings. And it's amazing just how many recommendations are sorted through even before we finalize which recommendations are coming to the commission. So it is not easy. I mean, many commissioners give anywhere from 6 to 10 hours extra of a week, depending on the week. And that is just a lot of work on top of daily jobs. So really, congratulations on the amount of work that goes in. Since our last commission meeting on March 14th, 2023, subcommittees have met bi-weekly, even weekly at times, to gather information from subject matter experts to deliberate and identify priorities. Today, you'll be hearing from subcommittee co-chairs and members who will present summaries of the meetings they've had, the issues they've considered, and share the recommendations they've drafted to present to the full commission and to share to the general public. This meeting is being live streamed to ensure that the commission is reviewing and deliberating recommendations in a transparent manner. We will be hearing presentations from subcommittees and discussing recommendations. 20 minutes is allowed for each recommendation. We have a lot of recommendations to go through today, including 5 minutes of presentation time. The commission is expected to send back any recommendations that the group feels requires additional refinement or exploration before submitting to the President. At the end of today's meeting, the commission will vote on recommendations that they feel are thoroughly vetted and can be finalized with the majority of the full commission. Please remember to turn your table cards up so I can keep track of who's in line. And And when you would like to speak, please speak slowly and clearly so that our ASL interpreter can capture your comments. So with that, I believe we can get started. Sorry, well, I'm going to turn it back over to Crystal for just a second.
Thank you, Sonal. We actually do have one other speaker before you start your official subcommittee business, and that is Marvin Figueroa, who is the director of the Office of External and Intergovernmental and External Affairs at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. He is here on behalf of Secretary Javier Becerra, who, as all of you know, is one of our co-chairs. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Marvin.
Thank you, Crystal, and aloha, everyone. I'm so glad to be here with you all today. It was a doozy of a flight, but nonetheless, I guess I'm here on behalf of Secretary Becerra and really just grateful for the fact that you all are here today as well. Just a couple of updates from my end. I think when we started our relationship, when we talked in DC, we talked about how we were going to try to do this just a little bit different. I just want to give you a couple of updates. We had a successful NHPI Heritage Month. We had an incredible number of events. And it wasn't only the events with the Vice President I want to highlight, but Secretary Becerra was also able to meet with a number of NHPI leaders to talk about how the community sees itself in some of our priorities. So we talked about behavioral health and how we can improve the way that we serve the NHPI community, not only in schools, but also in clinics and other areas where they receive care. We talked a lot about Hep B and some of the issues with Hep B and some of the discrepancies that we're seeing, and how we can address that through some of the NIH dollars that have been put into the work. And then we said that we were going to do a behavioral health summit, which we have scheduled for next month, and we're so excited to have your participation and your involvement in the planning, but also the execution of that summit. Two is that we also talked about the fact that this commission and the work that you're doing should not be separate, but should be integrated to everything that we do within the department. We started to have a number of different meetings with the different divisions within HHS to ensure that your voices are not heard at the end of the process, but at the beginning of the process. So that looks very differently depending on the issue area, from behavioral health and the work that we're doing there and the dollars that are going out the door. Two is the renewal process right now for Medicaid, right? So we're working with a different number of states to ensure that the NHPI community is do not lose their coverage, right? So we're focusing on states, and so that, because I know that's very, very important to you all. And then two, we're working a lot on also reproductive health. And making sure that as we're working to make sense of what the Dobbs decision means for the country, that you all have a seat at the table. And one issue that kept coming up is hiring. We are detailing and kind of putting in a lot of time, but you also need permanent staff. I don't know how much of a celebration this is, but we were able to hire one person permanently, so that's awesome. If you know the federal hiring process, you will be clapping. Two is that we made an offer to someone else. We're waiting to get the start date and see how that plays out. And working with Erica, we were able to also secure 2 additional White House political appointees. And so we're working to interview and get those folks on board. So my hope is that by the next time that we're together, we'll have a fair amount of permanent staff, the permanent staff that you deserve to be able to carry out the important work that you're doing. This all wouldn't be possible without the backing of Secretary Becerra and him putting his muscle behind this work. But I also wanted to make sure that I was here to deliver the news personally. I'm so glad again to be here. I'm looking forward to joining you all later on today, to fellowshipping, and again, working together to make sure that we're advancing the priorities of the NHPI community. Before I sit down, we had a number of field visits yesterday. And one of the things that I didn't realize, having worked in the Capitol for so long, is the influence of the individuals whose statue you see at the front, right? We went to Kalapapa yesterday and learned a lot about leprosy and some of what was done to Native populations here. And it was touching, right? And it put things into context. And so that's why I really enjoy working with you all. Is kind of you put context behind the story, and you kind of bring things to life. And I'm so appreciative of the time you've taken to educate me, because through educating me and through your help and through your acceptance, I'm able to then work with you all to make better public policy. So again, on behalf of Secretary Becerra, I'm really grateful for the opportunity to be here, and I'm looking forward to working with you all. Aloha.
Marvin, thank you for your leadership. As everyone will see, we have been very busy in the last 3 months. So let me start with Commissioner Kai-Ying Yang, who will introduce the Subcommittee for Immigration and Citizenship and highlight the top priorities. So Kai-Ying, Commissioner Kai-Ying, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Commissioner Shaw. My name is Kai-Ying Yang Nyajong Sabaidi. I'm a little bit delirious by the fragrant plumeria flower, so if I speak too fast, it's because it's named after my daughter is named after the Dok Champa, which is the national flower of our ancestral land of Laos. And she's in the hotel sleeping still, so. I'm very honored to introduce and summarize the work of the Immigration and Citizenship Status Subcommittee. I am co-chair with Grace Huang. Our members include Dr. Amy Agbayani, Ajay Butorio, Simon Peng, Dr. Robert Underwood. Our ex officio member is Carol Wu, and our DFO is Linda Chang. Our priority issues have been focused on strengthening asylum processes, universal legal representation for individuals facing removal orders, protection for undocumented individuals, improving language access for individuals at risk of or facing immigration proceedings, including detained individuals, employment authorization for individuals in long visa backlogs, reducing the immigration court backlog, reducing immigration-based visa backlog, community-based alternatives to immigration detention, visiting impact of CARP control application review and resolution program on immigration status. We do have a lot to recommend today, but I would like to invite Commissioner Ajay Butoria to give us some very important updates on policy changes recently. Commissioner?
Thank you, Commissioner Kai-Ying. Thank you so much to the leadership of Crystal Kai, Erica, and the whole VIP team, Linda, Diana, Janet, Vivian, Jamie, Rebecca, Monica, Andrew. And thank you, Michelle, for beautiful flowers. So I have quick updates. I'm pleased to share some exciting recent immigration updates that have occurred and want to thank our commission members for their diligence and hard work. Recently, USCIS, and thanks to USCIS provided guidance on employment authorization, document based on compelling circumstances. This guidance allows individuals facing urgent situations, such as humanitarian concerns or compelling employment reasons, to apply for and receive an EAD employment authorization document while their underlying immigration application is pending. The Commission is reviewing I know this is very important to a lot of the community listening out the event. The Commission is reviewing the recommendation on granting EAD who have approved I-140 and who have been waiting in the visa backlog for 5 or more years. We are talking to the relevant agencies to ensure an accurate recommendation. Next, the Commission had recommended revising aging out kids on their parents' green card application in December 2022. Part of this recommendation, USCIS revised child age out calculation policy to benefit some adjustment of status applicants. The revised policy calculates the age of children in certain immigration cases, providing greater clarity and fairness, ensuring that eligible children retain their eligibility for immigration benefits and do not age out of the system. I know there's more work to be done here, and we are continuing. The Commission had recommended that USCIS should begin stamping H-1B visas in the US in September 2022. Recently, the State Department announced, and thank you to the State Department, announced launching a pilot program for domestic renewals of temporary work visas. This aims to streamline the visa renewal process and reduce processing times. The program will initially focus on H-1B and L visa holders, with plans to expand it to include other eligible categories in the future. Lastly, one of the very important ones, the Commission recommended actions to reduce significant visa appointment wait times in December 2022. Thank you to the administration, as administration has taken steps to reduce wait times and improve visa appointment processes around several embassies around the world. Visa appointment delays have been significantly reduced to 2 to 4 weeks, allowing individuals to plan their travel and immigration processes more efficiently. Additionally, students applying for a student visa can certain embassies can now do so up to 1 year prior to college admission date, providing them with greater flexibility and ease of transition. These recent immigration updates reflect the direct impact of the VIP Commission's recommendation and the commitment of Biden-Harris administration to help families and create immigration policies that are more inclusive, efficient, and responsive to the needs of our community. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Butoria. I want to continue. We do have, our subcommittee has 5 recommendations, and we heard from a number of presenters, and I'd like to acknowledge them. Doug Rand, Senior Advisor to the Director of U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services of the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. Monica Burke, Acting Assistant Director, Custody Management, Enforcement, and Removal Operations of the DHS, U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Blaine Bookey, Legal Director, Center for Gender and Refugee Studies, University of California College of Law. Shobha Siva Prasad Wadia, Officer of the Office for Civil Rights and Civil Liberties at the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. Mary Chang, Deputy Director, Executive Office of Immigration Review, U.S. Department of Justice, and all of her colleagues. And now I would like to invite Commissioner Robert Underwood to provide the first recommendation.
Commissioner Underwood, can I just make one statement? For those of you who have your phones on, can you please put them on silent so we don't hear the beeps that are constantly happening? And remember, to everyone, your mics are hot at all times. So these mics do not turn off. So if you're not speaking, I would urge you to just lift it up.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Commissioner Yang. Aloha, half a day to all of you. I appreciate all the kind statements that many of you have made as a result of the recent typhoon in Guam, Mawar, and also want to publicly thank federal partners in the island's recovery. Problem statement number 1 refers to COFA migrants from the 3 freely associated states. The compacts of free association with the countries of Palau, the Marshall Islands, and the Federated States of Micronesia are allowed to freely migrate into the United States as a result of these treaties. Commonly referred to as COFA migrants, they face multiple challenges related to proving that they are lawfully in the United States. Many COFA citizens face significant delays and costs in replacing U.S. entry receipts known as I-94 cards, which are attached to their home country passports, creating difficulty in getting housing, jobs, driver's licenses, and unemployment insurance. In addition, at times, their identification documents do not match information in the e-verification system, creating more problems with maintaining employment. Therefore, recommendation number 1, the Commission recommends that the Department of Homeland Security should streamline and expedite the process for accessing and or replacing lost or distorted I-94 cards, making it more affordable and efficient with a turnaround time of less than 3 weeks. The Commission also recommends that DHS should exempt or waive fees for COFA migrants who apply for replacement I-94s. Let me discuss a little bit about the rationale for this. Under the Compacts of Free Association, as I said, referred to as COFA, first approved in Public Law 99-239 in 1986, and Public Law 99-658 approved in 1994, citizens of the freely associated states of the FSM, the Republic of the Marshall Islands, and the Republic of Palau are legal non-migrants allowed for indefinite periods of time to live, work, and study in the United States without a visa. This population currently is estimated at around 94,000. Due to their particular immigration status in the United States, COFA migrants face multiple challenges to access work, government benefits, in part due to difficulties obtaining accurate I-94 forms, navigating the e-verification process, and lack of general awareness of employees and other entities, including states and local governments, about their legal rights in the United States. While the U.S. USCIS, DHS, Custom and Border Patrol has a process for individuals to retrieve their Form I-94 admission record online. These records are not generally available for 5 years after entry, and many individuals face difficulty in navigating the process. Employers and schools are often unaware of the rights of COFA migrants to work or obtain educational benefits, and need further outreach through the appropriate government agencies about the unique challenges that COFA migrants face in obtaining accurate documentation. Up until 2014, the I-94s were issued only in paper form and attached as well and recorded to a specific passport. If those passports were renewed subsequently, it was hard to trace that original I-94 since it was tied to an expired passport. Additionally, if a form were lost, a $445 fee was charged to find a copy. If the passport had been renewed since first entry into the United States, and for some this has occurred in the 90s and in the early 2000s, it was almost impossible to reconstruct this effort. It was many found it easier to travel to Mexico or the Canadian border and re-enter the United States and get an I-94. Recently, these I-94s can be requested at deferred inspection sites managed by CPB in selected cities. There are still fees associated with this. So we urge approval of this process.
Thank you, Commissioner Underwood. We have about 15 minutes for conversation, so colleagues, if you have questions, please raise your name tag. Ajay?
I just want to add that this is very important. I just want to add that I strongly support this, and this is very important for folks, because this will, a lot of folks are stuck without having this card to go for employment or continue with their daily life. So having this process streamlined will really help people.
Daniel.
This is very convenient. Identification documents often do not match information in the e-verification system. Is there a cultural reason for this, or is there any particular reason why this community is having that issue?
The I-94 was originally issued as a paper document attached to a specific passport from the FSM or the Marshall Islands. When that passport expires, they go get a new passport, but trying to find the I-94 for that new passport, since they're in the United States already, is very difficult because the previous paper document was attached to a specific passport. And so, the other thing too on the employment verification, the difficulty for them is that they have to pay this $445 fee, whereas the employment verification is free.
But it has nothing to do with names matching or anything like that that would represent a cultural issue.
Some of them, because some of them have different kinds, unusual names. Some societies have only one name, and then but that's more a passport problem. But it really is about the I-94 system that attached that paper document. So if you lived in near the Canadian border or near the Mexican border, it was actually cheaper for you to just go in, cross the border, come back in, and get a free I-94 upon entry.
Yeah. Thank you.
Commissioner Kayin?
Yeah. I just want to add to Dr. Underwood's comment is that it's really important that if they're already in this country there and they have the I-94, that we urge the relevant agencies to really make the process a lot more streamlined and the process much easier.
There is some risk there. There's also the issue that you could get a deferred inspection site. You can get those now, but
Michelle?
Thank you. Just want to say mahalo to the committee for this recommendation. And to say how important it is, just want to echo the importance of the I-94 in terms of employment. We have a significant population of COFA. Is that our Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander population end up, because of lack of employment, making up so much of our homeless population. So it's an incredibly important recommendation, and I just applaud the commission for bringing that here as we meet in Hawaii, because we do have
Commissioner Luisa? Can you also just make sure when you bring the mic down to bring it close to you so we can hear you?
So I guess the problem that I'm having to understand is they're part of the United States. I want to understand if there's specific things within the process that needs to make sense to me. And so if we can sharpen it a little bit stronger so that the work gets done within the different agencies. Because I'm sure this is a long problem, right? Hasn't happened just overnight.
Well, the issue is that these the citizens that come from these three countries, they're actually other countries. They're independent nations. That's very difficult for many people to understand. Even people who are trained to do this at the border sometimes don't understand it. So that's an ongoing issue. But this particular issue is related to the paper document, which is actually in 1998, and I was 8 years old, and I came, and then I had a passport, and I had an I-94, but I never went back to Pohnpei, and I lost the I-94, but and I had to go get some new passport from my home country. Then I'm really out of luck to try to prove that I'm some of a previous passport. So there's a lot of anomalies to this. Another anomaly, which is for an entirely different recommendation, which surfaced in the course of the work of typhoon recovery, is that COFA citizens are not eligible to apply for FEMA.
Commissioner Amy, I saw you had put your mic down, but you, okay. Ajay.
Yeah, Louisa, to add answer to what Robert said, I-94 is required when you enter the United States from these countries or any other country. It has some dates in it, and that document becomes a living document for helping through the employment process and other process. And if the document is lost or is misplaced, getting it renewed is a very difficult process here. And as well as he mentioned, kids who arrived at 8 years age, for those people, that document is not updated in E-Verify. So it only goes back to certain year, and that is why the system is
this recommendation forward. I fully support it. I also wanted to bring up and emphasize the angle that since this is holding up a lot of employment for the COFA migrants, that it is actually increasing health disparities because of how our employment-based health insurance majority system works in this country. And we know that there's a lot of health disparities within our Micronesian populations, and that it would actually help a lot of the states and hopefully wanting to work in those states. So we need to get this done so that they can also have downstream effects like getting health insurance. Thank you.
Okay, I do not see other comments here, so Commissioner Kaing, I'm going to turn it back over to you if you want to move on to the next recommendation.
Okay. Thank you.
Let me just clarify, there's no wording change anyone is recommending.
And Commissioner Amy Agbayani to present the next recommendation.
Thank you very much. Significant numbers of individuals from Asia and Pacific Island countries who are detained by Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, fail to understand and are unable to fully participate in immigration proceedings. Failure to provide language services results in wrongful reasons in violation of federal law and policies, as well as the federal government's commitment to equity, due process, and justice. This is very basic to understand that communication means meaningful communication, and that's not occurring in the ICE process. So our recommendations are, one, that the Executive Office of Immigration Review in the Department of Justice should issue guidance so as to assist with the completion of relevant application for immigration relief. In addition, the Department of Homeland Security ICE office should allocate at least 1% of its enforcement and removal budget towards the provision of professional and competent translation, interpretation, and other language services for individuals who are detained and have limited or no English proficiency. This includes, but is not limited to, language services for all communications between detained individuals and employees of the detention facility, ICE, and other Department of Homeland Security components in the law library, medical care, and translation of immigration forms. Language access is really fundamental to to any process, and so English really face enormous problems. And as we mentioned earlier, they are removed, and many other violations, and just cost or need for having trained individuals to help translate. But those are actually may make it more efficient to have people to assist, and it also is really a basic right to know what it is that's happening to you and your family. So we recommend we have these recommendations.
Thank you, Commissioner Agbayani. Questions for this particular recommendation? Daniel? Oh, one quick thing, Daniel, before you go. It is right now, so if you don't mind putting it down, that would be great. Thank you.
Thanks for the recommendation, Commissioner Agbayani. Quick question for you. You mentioned that there is, well, actually, my question is, do you know if the same situation applies to Spanish-speaking immigrants, and do you know if there are funds allocated to that community?
I don't know the answer to that, but I do know that there are many more resources and more Spanish-speaking law enforcement people available and so the Spanish community, language community, really has many barriers, but in terms of having language translation, not just for immigration issues, but for other issues and federal websites and so forth, they have more resources available to them. And there are some of those that are very small, very few people speak it, but that is not, but one person not having that language access is an injustice. So we need to have more language resources for languages spoken by these individuals who are detained and removed.
Would it strengthen the recommendation if we specified that this 1% was to go toward languages from Asia?
Oh. That would strengthen it. AAPI languages.
I have a feeling that Commissioner Grace Wong has a particular view on this, and I know she knows more about it.
I think, is this on? I guess I got to get it close to me. I think the challenge is that there's no specified, percentage or allocation at all for language, language access, and while there is more availability for interpretation translation in Spanish, I think there's a shortfall even in that context in a lot of situations, such as, we have heard, of course, of folks who have been unable to get medical care, for example, and in the contracts that ICE has with its contractors, that isn't necessarily a component of it is a component. It's part of the detention standards, but it's not necessarily enforced very well. And I think a start and Hindi and some of the other languages, but also making sure that the services that are available have the capacity to engage languages that are of lesser diffusion, such as some of our other Asian languages. And I know DHS is working right now to deal with some of the indigenous languages that that many migrants have, speak from, some of our neighboring countries. But there's a long way to go, and not, from my understanding, a clear direction around accountability for all the contracts that relate to language access, often in situations that may result in people being deported, to their death or, that face serious injury or illness while they're in detention.
I wonder what the metrics are, in terms of how budgets get allocated to communities speaking specific languages, and whether it's proportional to the number of immigrants or people this would be affecting.
It's a great question. Victoria, Commissioner Victoria.
Thank you, Commissioner Abayani, for the recommendation. I fully support making sure that there is funding allocation for language access. My question was kind of along the lines of Commissioner Kim about consideration of the data collection, right? The percentage or number of individuals that have been directly impacted already, and kind of what does that forecast look like, for those who are coming through the system. And my question is 1% enough, right? And I'm not sure of what the entire enforcement and removal budget is, but 1% of that, would that be sufficient to cover all of the language needs across all of our diverse communities?
As mentioned earlier, we don't know what their budget is, or it's probably there is no specific allocation, so we have a difficult time assessing how much need there is, but clearly there is a great financial need, and so I'm open to any recommendations to discuss, but 1% seemed really at least a way to make it visible that this is it's obviously more than we have. Commissioner Wong?
Commissioner Wong.
I mean, we went with a suggestion around 1% of this budget, given that the ERO budget in fiscal year 23 was $4.52 billion in ICE, and with 2.88 of it being custody operations. And so, I mean, let's just say 1% would be a significant increase from what it is now.
Commissioner Shaw.
Thank you, Chief. Commissioner Wong, you made a really interesting comment when you were just speaking, that this is not just related to DHS employees, but also contractors that work for DHS. Within this recommendation, can we simply also add language that says the contractors who are recruited by DHS are required to provide language access services? It becomes part of the procurement process for contractors.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
I think that's a great idea. I mean, I think that it was contemplated when we were putting together the recommendation, but sure, I think explicit.
I mean, there's, when I look at this, I mean, if you're talking about 1% of the budget for just language access, but if you make it a procurement requirement for anybody providing contractor services, I think as the co-chair of the Economic Equity Committee, I also think it might create some opportunities for community organizations and Asian American entities to participate in the process. So I wouldn't make too many substantial changes, just say any contractors that are, and I don't know if we want to do that now or how the process is, but I would just keep it very simple and say any contractors retained by DHS shall be required to provide language access services for. Yeah.
We will, I think after this conversation's over, take this offline and just go work on some language changes, but that's a great recommendation. Commissioner Blue?
Thank you.
So I think 1% is a good start, right? And hopefully we can be able to build on that, but either in a future recommendation from the subcommittee or this commission, that we really ought to get down to the numbers, like how much is being paid into translation services, right? because it's a way of accountability also, right? And then it brings me back to a recommendation that we brought forward from the anti-hate thing about response time. Because, and I'm just going to share this story really quick, but a few years ago, I was able to visit a detention center at the border. There was one Chinese immigrant there, and all I could think about was, who is talking to this woman? Because no one's speaking her language, it's mainly Spanish, and all I knew how to say was hello, and she just like grabbed my hand. And I'm like, oh, I can't speak anything else other than hello. But I thought about her, you know, like, who's helping this woman out? I don't know how many countries she had fled to get to the border in Texas, and yet she does not have access to that. So I think we have to be very mindful of that, because the increase in AAPI migrants to the border is going to increase as people continue to flee their country for whatever reason, and we should be mindful of that. But I support the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Chang?
Thank you. I fully support this recommendation as well. I have one comment and one question. The comment is, in the second public meeting of our commission, we put forth some recommendations to the Office of Management and Budget about recommending that there be looked at how much % of each agency's or department's budget is allocated, or even if there's any allocation to language access services. So wondering what the status of that is. I think we also mentioned in that recommendation some things about procurement. So just comment about, we are trying this to the public out there. We are trying to address this from many different angles and many different subcommittees, and it's very important to us and to this commission. So that's the comment. The question is, I really like this recommendation. I wonder, do we have numbers on the number of people who are turned away and sent away because they don't have language access in the courts? You know, what you're trying to address here, who are the people who are removed, and then what languages they may have, and wondering if that is something we can get from DHS. Thanks.
I think we could make the request. I think during our discussion, they had difficulty even just giving us information on the countries that these people came from, let alone the languages that were used. So it's data that we should try and get, and we will make a request. We can make a request for that information.
We may also may want to think about it in future commission meetings to make a recommendation that they start collecting that data, so we know who's being turned away based on what, or if anyone requests the language. Commissioner Kelsey?
Thank you, Commissioner Shaw. I fully support this recommendation, and I wanted to also echo Commissioner Chang's thoughts, where we had previously worked on an initiative, recommendation to create sort of a, for lack of a better term, really an Office of Translational Services. You know, instead of getting hung up on how much everything is going to cost now, you know, the first gasoline engines gave us 1 or 2 miles to the gallon, right? And now we have engines that give us, you know, potentially 50, 60, 100 miles to the gallon. So as we build the machine, translation will become much more efficient. We just need to push from many different angles to make this happen, and eventually it will become efficient. But the lack of inefficiency right now should not stop us from providing a service that is sorely needed on so many fronts. It affects economics, it affects healthcare, it affects immigration, so many access points to our government. So, but it's a wonderful, wonderful recommendation, and I strongly support it. So thank you.
Commissioner Doi?
Thank you, Chief. I also am fully supportive of this recommendation. I'm wondering, however, about a potential agencies as well as the courts that hire professional translators, and I'm wondering what the standards are for becoming a certified translator, and if that might inhibit the implementation of this kind of recommendation.
There are various certification requirements and standards, particularly for the courts, and it will require us, the department, to, and I think that's an ongoing discussion, and there's clearly no standards for many of the languages that we're looking at, and very few, therefore they wouldn't get certified. So it's an issue that we have to address and can't be addressed unless we have resources and that this becomes a recommendation that can be acted upon.
Can I just, but can we then just simply add a little bit in there, the provision of certification and professional translation services? Is that worthwhile to do, or is that too many steps? Just because if that's going to become a stumbling block, if you add that in there as part of your thinking.
I don't know the answer to this. I think it's a great question, but I worry that if you add certification now, it's a whole different set of conversations, with starting with first with just translation services, and then it'll sort of add into it over time and start the conversation.
Perfect.
Commissioner Blue, last comment.
Yeah, so I would say that a certification process does exist already, because there's many departments that have translation. I just think folks need to get on it.
Yeah.
Okay, they just need to do it.
So I'm hearing two major comments here for this particular recommendation, Commissioner Agbani. One, to put in the comment about contractors, and then the second, just probably adding in AA NHPI languages as part of the 1% conversation. Anything else in terms of comments, Commissioner Bateola?
Yes, we were just in a little consultation here. We need to be very careful about certification, because many emergent languages do not have certification standards. The importance is competency, whether it's legal interpretation, healthcare interpretation. Competence has to be established, not necessarily certification. Thank you.
Right. So nothing on certification, but if we can get those two. So if you don't mind, before we go into the final voting, just getting that language clarified, and I think we can work with you. And Smita, maybe you can help with the language. That'd be great. Thank you. Moving on to the next.
Yes.
Commissioner Yang.
Thank you very much for that very robust deliberation. I invite Commissioner and my co-chair, Grace Huang, to present the next recommendation.
Thank you. So the next issue that we're trying to address is that there's a lack of clear policy governing how the Department of Justice, or DOJ, and the Department of Homeland Security, DHS, should treat claims of gender-based persecution against survivors of domestic violence, sexual assault, forced marriage, and other forms of gender-based violence who are seeking protection under U.S. asylum law and policy, including from Asian and Pacific Island countries. And thus, our recommendation is that the Department of Justice, DOJ, and Department of Homeland Security promptly issue new asylum regulations and track performance metrics to provide consistency in the United States treatment of gender-based violence as a basis for humanitarian protection and asylum in U.S. immigration policy. And so for a little bit of background, let's see, where should I go? U.S. immigration law, it provides that certain non-citizens who might otherwise be removed from the U.S., they can be granted relief because they would likely face persecution in their country of origin.
under our asylum laws. And to qualify for asylum, an applicant has to show either past persecution or a well-founded fear of future persecution on account of race, religion, nationality, membership in a particular social group, or political opinion. And the applicant must also show that the persecution by the government or groups that the government, persecution by the government or groups that the government is unwilling or unable to control. And so some of the background behind this recommendation is that in June of 2018, then Attorney General Sessions overturned an asylum applicant's grant of asylum by the Board of Immigration Appeals and vacated an earlier Board of Immigration Appeals precedent decision that had confirmed that domestic violence survivors could qualify for asylum in the United States. That was the decision in the matter of AB, and it held that people who feared domestic violence in their home countries generally don't qualify for asylum based on those grounds. And then furthermore, the administration codified a matter of AB along with other asylum-related decisions in a rule that would foreclose asylum to many applicants. And so when President Biden entered office on February 2nd, he issued an executive order addressing migration to the United States, and the executive order covered the issue of availability of asylum for individuals seeking to enter. And he had directed the AG and the Department of Homeland, and the Secretary of Homeland Security to review the availability of asylum for applicants fleeing gang or domestic violence, and to issue joint regulations that clarify the meaning of particular social group in this context within 270 days. And so we are past 270 days. And then while the AG had vacated his predecessor's decision restoring past case guidance for survivors, there's still a lot of confusion in the field, and we're hearing that there's inconsistent decision-making around this topic. And so the recommendation is that the recommendation is that the regulations be issued to provide consistency in policy across the agency.
Thank you, Commissioner Young. Questions? Commissioner Samoa?
Thanks so much to the subcommittee for producing a really important recommendation. My question revolves around the term gender and gender-based. In this day and age, transgender violence doesn't necessarily equate to domestic violence. And so would they be included in this gender-based recommendation? And then there are countries that have issue with sexual orientation. And although sexual orientation is the issue in their country, it's the gender that they're based in that's causing the violence towards them. Are they considered part of this recommendation as well?
Excuse me. Yes, they would be. I mean, the background that I just gave spoke specifically to domestic violence, but the regulation that we're talking about speaks to persecution based on particular social group, and we have a long history of based on female genital mutilation, and over the years the case law had developed to cover persecution based on your particular social group, which included in some cases needs to be issued about how folks are targeted because they belong to a particular group. Yes, the groups that you're speaking of would be included in this regulation.
Other questions? Okay. Commissioner Yang. I think we can keep moving.
Thank you very much. Our fourth recommendation will be presented by Commissioner Simon Pang.
Recommendations. One of the problems that we had discussed extensively during our meetings, the Department of Homeland Security is mandating the use of CBP-1 mobile application for certain
Commissioner Pang, can you speak into your mic? Sorry.
Yes, ma'am. Sorry. The Department of Homeland Security is mandating the use of CBP mobile application for certain migrants to schedule presentation appointments at ports of entry along P1. CBP-1, however, is only translated into Spanish and Haitians, and the demographic of individuals arriving to the southwest border extend far beyond. The Commission recommends that DHS should translate the CBP-1 mobile application into multiple languages, including but not limited to Bengali, Chinese, Hindi, and Punjabi. So as you can see, that this is a language is always, creates some hurdle for a lot of all the issues, including equity.
I just want to put into multiple AA NHPI languages, including but not limited to.
Okay, noted.
Commissioner Mia.
Thank you so much for this recommendation. I was thinking that we may based on some previous certification versus competency, etc. I think it's going to be important that build up a base of translators who can do the work that needs to be done, because I know from conversations and competency to be able to provide these translators to do this work. So I was wondering if folks had thought about putting together some type of line of individuals who are able to do specifically for things like immigration or healthcare. Thank you.
Great comment.
Issue area, which will be coming up later, but we do say we have to build a pipeline of qualified language translators and interpreters, and funding required for.
Commissioner Victoria.
Thank you for the recommendation. I strongly support the translation of a mobile application, especially for such an important kind of topic. Or, it's not user friendly, where their recommendations or even thought about including maybe a consideration for life support.
Commissioner Kim?
Just to dovetail off of what Victoria was just saying, there are a lot of AI translations. I did not know the language, and it was so good that I did not even know it was being simultaneously translated. So that technology exists right now. I don't know how that can get implemented into any, well, I see like cards going up right now, so.
Go ahead, please.
I'm so sorry. I know we actually have a recommendation that I think Commissioner Chang is about to talk about, but it is around AI, and there have been asylum because the AI translation services utilized mistranslated a small, like, be careful about recommending AI translation services for anything to do with something so important like immigration issues or health issues.
We did have a lot of discussion about this, and the CBBP is the official app that is being used in the border, but it's going to probably go global. So that's one. The second is, and I agree with Commissioner Mia about the AI. The second issue is in person. Yes, we have some of the sites for detention and places are in areas that do not have a lot of people of color or people who speak multiple languages. So there's a challenge in the system itself to ensure that there's people and communities that speak multiple language. Recommendation, but I want us to have an opportunity to discuss it within the subcommittee and also to hear what my co-commissioner Grace Huang is about to say, but I hope
say what Commissioner Yang had already said, but another piece is there is the in theory in policy there is the ability to that work along the border is often people are just turned away, and that Border Patrol, a whole nother set of issues not specifically related to language access, but rather accountability for the processes that are there for those who are unable to utilize the app.
I think this recommendation is an important step. One of the things that we need to remind ourselves is that we care about those who are underrepresented, who have come from extreme circumstances and have had duress, or they're cultural or personal, and that is what makes the difference. And so I think that subcommittee is really addressing a very, very important component, which is the access piece. But once we have the access piece, to truly have an appropriate communication, we need all aspects of the communication modules.
I believe current recommendation, and I just wanted to, ask a quick question about like the particular languages that were selected, use those languages. There's a particular need in those communities. Were they just examples? How do we select those languages? Because if we did at random suggestion and just say a wide variety of NHPI languages rather than giving examples, but there might have been a particular reason why those were used.
Order, and again, it was very challenging, but we understand that these are some of the primary individuals from these communities, language speaking communities that are coming down the border. But yes, I agree with you. I think that we can keep it much more open. I think our challenge has been just trying to get information and data from our government. So thank you.
Comments? I think, Commissioner Yang, I think Peng, we only have one recommendation, which is just to add in the language on broader AA and HPI languages. But this was a super helpful conversation. I think I learned a lot. Your recommendation for translation, for qualified translation services, it may be like whether it's in immigration, whether it's in healthcare, but the types of qualifications we're looking for. So it sort of meets our recommendations too. Does that make sense? We've asked for language access in lots of places, and I think it might be good to look at where the places that we've asked for language access and make sure we're actually particularly focusing on training also for the specific areas that we've made recommendations.
Like medicine and
public
legal,
health,
whatever.
legal, different places.
So that's one of our future recommendations we've been discussing in the subcommittee, having a language access translation board, which takes into all these requirements and helps through this process with all the federal agencies.
Great. Perfect. Let's keep moving, Commissioner Yang.
All right. Our fifth
recommendation is about Department of Homeland Security is authorized to issue
Commissioner Patoria, can you?
Sure. 480,000 family-based immigrant visas, green cards, and 140,000 have resulted in the full number of available green cards not being used annually. The Commission recommends that the Department of Homeland Security and the Department 25. The Commission also recommends that the State Department incorporate Cooperation with Diya. Even if the agency cannot process the relevant paperwork, in that fiscal year. This policy should be applied retroactively to recapture green card recapture process. Green card recapture is a policy proposal that would allow a backlog. How many green cards are there? Which are not backlogs. Underutilization of green card represents a lost opportunity for the U.S. economy. Those in long backlogs, mainly from AAPI and countries. The lack of green cards limits their immigration status when they turn 21. So the numbers which are available on says that between a National Immigration Forum, there are over 1 million unused green cards that have been accumulated since 1992 in different categories of family-based, employment-based, and diversity and other categories. So I will conclude with saying that this recapture process will really help advance our U.S. economy as well as families.
Thank you, Commissioner Batoria. Questions? Teresita? Commissioner?
Reticent to begin this conversation. I think it is important to recapture, and I'm glad for these. And I give an example. My uncle, my dad's brother, waited for 30 years and so could not go forward with that sponsorship. So I bring this as an example because while I personally agree that the recapture is important because there are a lot of people waiting and needing the opportunities. That's why I'm wondering if this is opening up a Pandora's box, given that any kind of movement towards immigration change in this country has been stymied.
I absolutely agree. I mean, there's a huge backlog process, creates a lot of pain and suffering for families and for reunification. Totally agree with you. And this recommendation is, my understanding is based on the application date and when you get in the queue. And this recommendation is not on how the allotment should be done. I think they will follow their standard process based on how the queue. But to your point, which is well taken, we'll work on a separate recommendation and we can discuss more in our meetings what additional details needs to be there.
For the allotment.
Yes.
Commissioner Kelsey?
Definitely much needed. I wanted to ask you about impact, which you already shared. Is you think over about 1 million different allotments would be recaptured, and want to echo Commissioner Teresita's also thoughts about equitable recapture. You know, what does that mean for our AA NHPI communities? You know, I think all of us have stories of family members and friends that have waited decades. Wait, you know, less than 6 months. It's just not fair. So I would urge you, talks about more equitable disbursement of these positions that are captured.
Absolutely. We look forward to work together in this for next recommendation.
Other questions?
Yes, right on time. Thank you very much to all my colleagues for the hard work that they put into this. So thank you very much. We're done with our subcommittee recommendations.
Okay, so we're going to take a 10-minute break. Give everybody a chance to stretch your legs, and we'll be back. For those online, we'll be back in about 10 minutes. Ahead and keep rolling through. So the next set of recommendations, transposing words today, I apologize, to introduce the subcommittee and highlight the top.
But thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to present recommendations from the Health Equity Victoria Nguyen, Dr. Kimberly Chang, Michelle Kawahani, Dr. Kamal Kalsi, AJ Vivian Chow. So at the very beginning of our work, we designated some priority areas for us and/or sexual violence, addressing mental health issues, including a focus on AA and NHPI anti-bullying resources, human trafficking, COVID-19 and equitable response, environmental justice, challenges in accessing healthcare, data collection, and disaggregation issues, and the healthcare workforce. Through recommendations for different priority issue areas. This time around, we had Sherry Hirota, former president of Asian Health Services, and Tu Quach, who is currently the co-CEO of Asian Health Services, including limited English proficiency as a category of medically underserved populations could improve health disparities and increase equity, justice, and opportunity for LEP, AA, and NHPI people. We also had the funding distribution of the Inflation Reduction Act funds and the design and deployment of Inflation Reduction Act funds designated for Director of Career Pathways, and Christina Alnajar, Chief Operating Officer of the Washington Association of Community Health, who So we will go directly into the presentations of the different recommendations that we are bringing forward to you today. And we will start off with the first.
Just to give the problem statement, when disaggregated breast cancer, and gastrointestinal cancer. Cancer is the leading cause of death and issues including a lack of accessible clinics and hospitals. Our recommendation is that the Commission recommends that both Office of Civil Rights adopt and enforce the Access Board's recommendations on medical diagnostics equipment diagnosed by their providers, also provide federal grant to cancer education to non-English speaking communities in culturally competent, easy to understand 2022. Asian Americans, I have already talked about. Disabled Asian Americans face even higher hurdles. The survey, ACS, indicates that 1.5 address barriers to improve outcomes and decrease mortality rates. Cancer screening rates for Asian Americans are significantly lower than their white counterparts. 75% of Asian American women received cervical cancer screenings compared to 83% of white women, compared to 72% of white women. Research and diagnosis of cancers when disaggregated by data. For breast cancer, diagnosed 40.3% of the time. For cervical cancer, 61.1% of Koreans were diagnosed. People who utilized mobility devices faced accessibility issues with exam or treatment rooms within the last 12 months to non-disabled women. Thus, disabled women are much more likely to die from cancer due to
Thank you, Commissioner Mia Ives Robley. Other questions? See any questions, so we can keep moving.
Yes, thank you. Affected AA and NHPI communities during the public health emergency. Devastating impacts have included anti-Asian hate, decimation of A and other factors. We have a number of recommendations regarding: 1, collect, disaggregate, analyze, and publish data impacts of COVID-19, disaggregated data for language preference, LGBTQ+, and other marginalized communities, and disaggregated as well as the long-term effects of COVID. Appropriate targeted public health campaigns on the benefits of vaccines, address vaccine hesitancy, and conduct community-specific vaccination days. And this would include third bullet for recommendation. Identify the appropriate Office of Minority Health, the National Institutes of Health, as well as the health resources and services in Medicare and Medicaid services. For underserved populations, which were accentuated during the pandemic, is coverage for those who are limited by the 5-year bar, meaning those who are legally present in this country but uncovered. Address the digital divide, conduct digital literacy efforts, and provide resources for digital equipment and connectivity for underserved communities, including AA and NHPI. Next, in publishing of public health emergencies, natural disasters, and human-made disasters, including violence against communities. Based upon the data collected. As you can tell, these are pretty extensive recommendations, much of which rely on data. While we know that in general, our communities have been affected, and There has been data that has been published that seems to indicate that Asians are well vaccinated, which we know also.
Commissioner Blue?
Thank you for this recommendation. So in terms of that data, does anyone know? Like, where do they get that data?
So organizations around the country, from hospitals, so those are all fed, but the data is not disaggregated in a way that we can really fully understand the
National Association for Health Centers. Does the ACE want to see if they're really reaching out within our communities that have that data?
Of what I know, APCHO does not have the capacity to collect this data. There are no reporting obligations from any of the institutions like hospitals and public health agencies to report it to a nonprofit organization.
About this, but now that the funding for COVID has staff train their staff to do their work differently, what is about that money like disappearing, because we still have to do all of that work?
Yeah, embedded in one of our recommendations is to make those resources available again.
Commissioner Chang?
Within HHS, it does not seem to have a centralized data collection for AA and NHPI issues, particularly around COVID. And I did want to highlight one of the bright spots, which was the Bureau of languages spoken for vaccines and testing and COVID rates, I believe. So we wanted to applaud that particular
Other questions?
I do want to asking appropriate federal agencies for data analysis reports. The agencies we named are all part of Health and Human Services. And that might be helpful for us to get a fuller picture of, so that would be helpful if commissioners could also provide us with your thoughts on that, either today or in the future.
Thank you. Commissioners?
Advocates for Native Hawaiian Pacific Island health. I think you just answered one of the questions. Sources that have been able to collect and report this activity in regards to the numerator, in regards to these rates. NHPI Health Data and Policy Lab that has been reporting this since they've been able to help also is to put the word accurate in there. They had us vaccinated at like 120%. And so, input to provide context to data. We'll talk.
Commissioner Shaw.
I think I'm okay.
You're okay?
I'm good.
No, just modification for that. So I think whenever we have our next break, if we could just add that modification.
So our next recommendation will be presented by Commissioner Ajay.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Thank you. This recommendation is focused in most schools is 400 to 400 students to one counselor or worse support. Leading to adverse outcomes including increased dropout rates, academic underachievement, and higher rates of depression and anxiety, and linguistic barriers. So the Commission recommends that the US ratios in public schools and colleges to improve Tier 1 mental health NHPIs. Specifically, the Commission will educate mental health support for students. Provide additional funding to public those with significant NHPI student population, and also health professionals to address the unique mental health needs of NHPI communities. The Department of Health schools and colleges to invest in reducing student to counselor ratios, public school and colleges. The guidelines should encourage public schools and colleges to prioritize schools and colleges to report their student to counselor. So closing this opportunities, and this is condition is which is deteriorating if this recommendation is trying to address that issue.
Commissioner Blue?
Go first. So I think a way to connect with the broader community, right? Like through present a lot of schools, you know, bus drivers, classified employees. Translators, and every day, right? So I just think it's a way to expand who we're worker, mental health within the AA. NHPI community, specifically work with the AA NHPI. And it has to get reopened again because it's more of the experience, because they often have to interact with.
I agree with you, Commissioner Luisa. So
Grace?
Hi. I center's doing the work, but one of my questions for you was whether or not there was any consideration of you know, strengthening cultural competence. That's important, but also just the available services there. Understanding what some of the unique that folks may be facing.
yeah. Absolutely. I mean, there's a strong community organization, support for community organization, which are providing the services to.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I've been thinking about, particularly around here, particularly for you know, first gen migrants coming to the U.S. When you're talking about mental health, and they're talking about physical symptomology, then you're not on the same, etc. I think also would love to see, I know, of course, we want to, schools in general, teacher to student ratio is extreme. In that area is to create peer that training to their peers, because they may be more readily
to hear of the current ratio for counselors and students at the high school and collegiate level. Engagement support. To maybe include that in the language of providing additional support.
Grace and Louisa, just before we close this out, I want to ask a question. Or community-based organizations, or are you recommending that there be another okay.
Right. And then later on, a more specific recommendation of workers that have to deal with this on a daily basis.
Added or modified, that would be great. You can work out. You don't have to do it right now, but you can work, before we go to vote. Any other, Grace?
Reflect. Cultural competent mental. Yeah.
Great. So we have two comments. When we modify the recommendation, that would be great.
Point to sort of address that word. We're not a monolith, on face it looks like Southeast Asia. Asians as well, and how there's a high dropout rate helps people understand that there's a dire need for our communities at whole.
That are being asked here, so thank you for that. Get through the next set of recommendations. But before we move on, I just want to, we're making references to our examples. Try not to as a whole and not individual organizations that we represent or our personal family members. So just a reminder for us.
And thank you for the reminder. Our last recommendation will be presented by Commissioner Mia Ives.
Thank you. Okay, so statement number 4. Health centers are communities and families. The federal government awards competitive funds to provide care for medically resource services Administration, HRSA, investments, including new access points and provides loan forgiveness to loan forgiveness. Limited English proficiency currently has unmet need score for need score for over 20 years. This has implications in limiting the growth of AA. So we have a couple of recommendations on this HHS definition and formula to determine at high need health centers. And 2011 negotiated rulemaking military. Next bullet, the HHS OC deprivation marginal underserved populations and high-risk populations. And grant eligibility are driven by such definitions and the various agencies.
We're good. Thank you.
For change, for something that we didn't consider until further to the areas and medically underserved populations, them up. So also grandfather in and existing access points.
Go ahead. Louisa, do you have your card up still?
approve this set of recommendations, and one of the we want to, because that's important, because when we developed this, we were serving our communities. So the amendment would be in the problem statement and also.
Other questions? Me, if you can work. Off when we're done here to just make the amended. Yes, I appreciate that. Other questions? Otherwise, we are going to turn it over to you to introduce the subcommittee.
There's 3 chairs, Victoria Hyun, Kimberly Chang, Pang. Our ex officio member is Laureen will be continuing to address our community with LEP, Limited English Priority. Prioritize and expand federal funding for AA and NHPI earlier discussed as and analyzed disaggregated information on specific languages within our center. Council on Native American Affairs and White House Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, Office of Minority Health. Policy Council. Identify which ones. The problem
statement and recommendation, but over the course of American Native Hawaiian Pacific Islanders that will reference, and this was per the recommendation of Commissioner Pang to make sure of 1964 14031. That's the one that we were charged with access federal programs, expand collection of prior public hearings and through deliberation. And it's also known as improving access to services for best language access. Needs of the populations they serve, that LEP individuals have an equal opportunity to participate and benefit from federally, and it was a tremendous step in addressing language access issues. Includes issues like resource constraints, inconsistent guidelines across all federal agencies. And the absence of a language access-based recommendation so it's a little bit lengthy, but we'll go through it. Language access affairs and explore language for new enforcement strategies across all federal agencies, executive order or EO. Known as the Language Access Equity Executive Order, to be implemented in White House. Office of Management and Budget, Department of Health and Human Services, Department of Home, AA and NHPI, and other individuals. The task force should identify all service entry points of these entry points within each federal agency where barriers exist for the data. For AA and NHPI, language needs enable a more accurate assessment and expand agencies' capacity to strengthen and accountability measures, training of this task force, a new executive order, enforcement tools, and addressing language access barriers that we've all discussed.
There's a lot in here, but it's questions, comments, questions. I just want to be here, Commissioner.
This is very, very thoughtful. I I just want to say I really, really appreciate it, all the work.
I just want to say this is a great recommendation.
I just want to say I really, really appreciate it, all the work.
I just want to say this is a great recommendation, and this is going to, streamline a process which could lead to further support of the language.
All the work.
I just want to say this is a great recommendation, and this is going to, streamline a process which could lead to further support of the language translation agency.
I just wanted
public hearings and through deliberation. And it's also known as improving access to services for best language access, needs of the populations they serve, that LEP individuals have an equal opportunity to participate and benefit from federally. And it was a tremendous step in addressing language access issues. It includes issues like resource constraints, inconsistent guidelines across all federal agencies. And the absence of a language access-based recommendation, so it's a little bit lengthy, but we'll go through it. Language access affairs, and explore language for new enforcement strategies across all federal agencies. Executive order, or EO, known as the Language Access Equity Executive Order, to be implemented in White House, Office of Management and Budget, Department of Health and Human Services, Department of Home, AA and NHPI, and other individuals. The task force should identify all service entry points of these entry points within each federal agency where barriers exist for the data for AA and NHPI language needs to enable a more accurate assessment and expand agencies' capacity to strengthen accountability measures, training of this task force, and new executive order, enforcement tools, and addressing language access barriers that we've all discussed.
There's a lot in here, but it's questions, comments? Questions? I just want to be here. Commissioner.
This is very, very thoughtful. I just want to say I really, really appreciate it, all the work.
I just want to say this is a great recommendation, and this is going to, streamline a process which could lead to further support of the language translation agency.
I just wanted to talking about the need to address language access across government, to echo my need for
talking about language access for a very long time. So, I am going to, joining us online, have not been able to listen in on the conversation on a constant basis with online. And in the meantime, we will be about 6:45 p.m. All of our